Good afternoon, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and I'm here to do a short review of The Doctor Will See You Now by Dr Amir Khan. So this is a non-fiction, it's a medical memoir, and I've mentioned a couple of times at various points that I do work in healthcare, so you might think that I wouldn't enjoy reading medical memoirs because it would be like going back to work, but actually I really love seeing different parts of like the medical sphere or the healthcare sphere presented through different people's memoirs. And since the first big medical memoir, This Is Going to Hurt by Dr Adam Kaye, came out years ago, the first time I read that, then I knew that this was going to be a genre that I would be reading a lot more of. I really enjoyed this. It was a very quick, light read, and this is an account of working in general practice, and in many ways it's a very persuasive account of the value of general practice and the interest and excitement that can come with general practice. So this is a second GP memoir that I've read. So just for comparison, I previously, a few years ago, read The Secret GP by Dr Max Skittle, and this one I think also came out at a similar time. Yeah, so both of these books were actually published in 2020. I just only came across this one recently at the Bradford Literature Festival. This one's particularly interesting for me because he works in Yorkshire and so do I. So I feel in a way when I'm reading his story, I'm hearing like the other half or the other side of the story for people that I might be working with. So I found that quite interesting. I would say the issue that you would have writing a medical memoir as a general practitioner is the episodic nature of care and the way that you see people for sort of 10 minutes at a time. And that was something that I really felt with The Secret GP, was that there were a lot of anecdotes of like, this happened in this particular appointment and this happened in another particular appointment, but there wasn't much of a narrative running through it. It was just kind of a collection of events. I think what Dr Khan does very effectively is he unites those events into some kind of sensible sequence. So the first couple of chapters I did feel were potentially a little bit stilted or a little bit, like I said, episodic, but then he kind of got into a stride of bringing together incidents that were either sort of thematically related. So there's a chapter, for instance, on animals, which you might think, how does that relate to the GP practice? But it did work quite well. And there's one about bodily fluids, for instance. But there are also themes that kind of run through over time. And there is one particular patient and one particular colleague. So a patient dealing with a very severe long-term health condition and a colleague dealing with burnout that are revisited time and again to kind of show the progression of those themes over Dr Khan's sort of 10 plus years of experience as a general practitioner, and I really liked how both of those stories isn't fair because they're true events, but both of those accounts kind of brought the overall book together. And I also liked how when he talked about patients that he might have seen once or twice in 10-minute care episodes, he brought those together into one chapter, and then kind of reflected on what he'd heard about how the patient had done after that. So you got a kind of a sense of the results and the outcomes, which gives you a kind of the end of the story, I suppose, or a bit of a holistic overview. And that is the thing that makes general practice so valuable and so worthwhile, is the idea of a family doctor who knows you, who follows your case, who understands what happens for you over time. And he kind of talks a bit about that, about why the role of the family doctor has changed so much, and why working in a city practice, he can't be the kind of GP that he had when he was a child and that he might have foreseen being, and yet how he tries to compromise and find a little bit of that family doctor role of knowing the patients really well where those patients need it. So I really liked that as an aspect. It's an easy read. It's definitely, it's not particularly dense. I found it quite emotional. He managed to show quite a lot of excitement, I guess, over the course of 10 years. Even in a GP practice, you will have a few different emergencies and things. So he was able to sort of build on those. He does say that the patients are sort of composite patients, rather than being exact replicas of things that he's seen, which obviously makes sense from a confidentiality point of view, but I'd imagine it also helps him to make the stories engaging and interesting. I finished this book thinking that if he was my GP, I would be proud of him in a way, and happy to have him as my GP, which in contrast, when I finished The Secret GP by Max Skittle, I ended that thinking I would be a little bit uncomfortable knowing that he was my GP, because I didn't didn't feel like it showed the same level of empathy and understanding that you get from here, even though it also has a bit of that kind of self-deprecating sense of humour, and a couple of ridiculous anecdotes and a couple of things where you think, oh well, was that really the right way to handle that situation? But obviously everyone's like he talks about complaints and how, you know, it's not possible, even if you do everything to the best of your ability, it's not possible to completely avoid issues coming up. The particularly interesting part of this for me was towards the end of the book. Even though it was published in 2020, he managed to squeeze a little bit of stuff about COVID into it, and that was very interesting for me because I was working with COVID patients in a hospital context, and he talks about like the very real fear that he had about going to work in red zone GP practices and work with patients who were symptomatic in the context of PPE that wasn't, you know, fully ideal, even though it was according to the guidelines, and the concerns that he had and how he didn't feel like ready for that, and he didn't feel like, you know, a soldier or that kind of thing, the way that people were kind of told that they would feel kind of thing. And you know, I worked with patients, some of whom were primary care practitioners, who had contracted the illness and had come into hospital, and although he was obviously he was lucky to avoid that, it was quite interesting for me to hear like how that was organised on the general practice side, and to kind of, yeah, to see that different perspective. So very much enjoyed that, and just enjoyed the book generally. I did cry a couple of times. One of the other aspect that I really enjoyed was the storyline in relation to transplant, which is one of the longer storylines through the book. Organ donation and transplant is something that's very, very important to me because of my things that I've worked with in the past, and it was beautiful to see a story that ended with I guess a happy ending, even though it's a mixed happy ending because, you know, the flip side of the transplant, but really nice to see how things were able to come together for a certain patient. Yeah, so I appreciated seeing that happy story, and I liked that this book, despite ending in the middle of COVID, still managed to have a happy ending and a positive ending relating to like the benefits of the NHS. So yeah, I thought worthwhile to do an NHS medical memoir review at a time when, you know, we've got a service that is really struggling, that we have ongoing strikes and issues over waiting lists, appointment availability and things like that. And this is a very good example of people who really care about what they're doing and are trying to do the best for their patients. Anyway, thank you very much. And let me know in the comments if you have any particular medical memoirs to recommend.